Hello class, this is the first video of the new Unit 10 volume flipbook. I'm sorry that I have a cold right now, so my voice is going to be a little bit lower and hopefully I won't be coughing at you, but we'll give this a try and see how it goes. The first section I wanted to talk about was definitions, and this is actually found in section number 1 of your flipbook. The bottom flap is labeled Parts of 3D Shapes. Let's go through a few basic words that you need to understand as we're talking about three-dimensional shapes and volume. The first thing I want you to write is, up at the top of the page right here, let's write the definition of a prism. Most students will understand other shape names that we go through, but prism is a different one. So a prism is made from polygons. Those are closed figures that are made with straight line segments. A prism is made from polygons, and at least two of the faces must be congruent and parallel. At least two of the faces must be congruent and parallel. And if you would, class, right above this definition, I want you to write here, these two faces that are congruent and parallel, they are called bases. There'll be a number of places where you're going to see this word base, and I want to make sure you know with a prism the two faces that are congruent and parallel are called bases. Now the one word you haven't known yet is faces. What's a face? So we'll go through that right now. So let's take a look at this first diagram. This is actually a prism. It's called a rectangular prism because all of the faces are made from rectangles. So I guess the first word we want to put in here is the word face. What is a face? And that would be the flat shapes or the polygons that make up the prism. Okay, so that's a face. So let's look at vertex. What's a vertex? I'll put that over here as well because I need room on the other side. A vertex is where three or more faces come together. So you see there's lots of them. Here's a vertex right here at the corner. You can see up here is a vertex, here. All of these corners are called a vertex. And then the last thing we'll talk about is what an edge is. Let's go ahead and define edge. The edge is where two of the faces come together. So this part right here is an edge. You can see there's edges all around. Now be careful about the words you use. Make sure you use the right word to describe the piece of the prism that you're talking about. Alright, let's continue on with the next shape, and then we're going to come back to this one in a moment. This next shape is called a pyramid. You've seen it before. Let's define some parts of the pyramid. The first thing I want to define is the base. So the base of the pyramid is the bottom of the pyramid, or the part of the pyramid that's not pointy. So we're going to call this the base. And let's draw an arrow to it so we see this bottom. In this case it's a rectangle, but it doesn't have to be a rectangle. This is the base of the pyramid. Now there are bases in prisms as well. But the issue is there's all kinds of bases. Remember, with a prism, it's the two faces of the prism that are congruent and parallel. Well, the top and the bottom are congruent and parallel. Left and right are congruent and parallel. Back and front are congruent and parallel. So one thing we want to note here is for a rectangular prism, and that's a prism made completely of rectangles. Remember, square is a rectangle, so that would also apply. For a rectangular prism, any face can be a base. This is not true of other shapes. For instance, there's only one base on this pyramid. There's two bases for this cylinder and one base for this cone. So that tells you on a rectangular prism, any face can be a base. Alright, Let's label a few more things here. This dotted line right here inside the pyramid, you can't see it if it was a solid pyramid, but that is actually the measurement of the height of the pyramid. These triangles on this particular pyramid, we have triangles all around the sides. Those are called not just faces, those are called lateral faces. So a lateral face. The reason we call it that is because the base is also a face, but it's not a lateral face. It's the face that's called the base of the pyramid. All right. How about this top part right here? Now remember, we know from the rectangular prism, all the corners here are vertices or a vertex. This is also a vertex, but it's a special kind of vertex. We're going to call it an apex. Apex means the top of something. So this is the apex of the pyramid. These corners on the bottom are also vertices, but they're not the apex. All right. Last thing on this pyramid we want to label is this line. If you see this line coming right down the middle of one of the lateral faces, it's perpendicular to the edge of a base. That is called the slant height. We're probably not going to deal with that in this unit. Maybe we might see it in a word problem, but this is called the slant height, and this is different from the height of the pyramid. The height is the distance from the base all the way straight up to the apex. The slant height is how tall the triangles on the side are. I got to get this box to go away here. All right, and let's make a note here. The slant height must be perpendicular, and there's our symbol for perpendicular, perpendicular to a base edge. So there's our parts of a pyramid. Some of these parts are the same parts that we have on a prism. Let's take a look at a cylinder. For a cylinder, we also have a base. I'm going to go ahead and write the word base right here. Let's label this bottom circle here a base. The top is also a base. Remember, there can be more than one base on an object. There's lots of them on a rectangular prism. There's 2 of them in a cylinder. There's 1 on a pyramid. Here is your base, which will always be a circle when we're looking at a cylinder. You can remember this. We have this little line right here. We call that the height. That is the height of the cylinder. And then we have these sides right here. This is called, it's not called a lateral face now because it's not a polygon. We call this a lateral surface because it's curved. Let's spell that correctly. A lateral surface. And actually, you know what? We have some of these same parts on our cone, which is down here, the cone. Let's go ahead and label these. The base of the cone is kind of like the pyramid. It's down here on the bottom. The height of the cone is right here, right up the straight up the middle of the cone, measuring the distance from the base to the vertex, which is an apex. The lateral surface is this part right here. It's the curved part around it. We know this top part right here is called a vertex, and in this case it's a special vertex. It's also called the apex of the cone because the very top. And then we also have something similar to a pyramid. We have this thing called slant height. Now again, never get that confused with the actual height. This is the measurement from the base edge to the apex. So we'll put on here, this is the distance from base edge to, and we can call this just a vertex because there is no other vertex on this, on a cone. Everything else is rounded. So we can say the distance from base edge to, let's go ahead and just say apex so we know we're talking about the top of the cone. So there are the key words that I want you to know. I want you to know what a prism is, what is a face, a vertex, and an edge, excuse me, the different parts of a pyramid, parts of a cylinder, and parts of a cone. That ends this video, and we'll continue on in the next one with more information about these particular shapes.